We want to thank our panelists for coming. I think they're going to have some really great things to share with us. They've had experience in the field, and they're going to tell us a little bit more about that in a second. But also want to thank Career Services, especially Sylvan of the NYU Journalism Department, for giving us a space to do this, which is very nice, certainly nicer than our Kimmel spaces in the past. But okay, so to my left here is Alicia Stewart. She's an editor at CNN. We also have William Gallego, who is an associate producer at Fusion, which is Univision and ABC's joint venture, started last fall, I believe. And then we have Gillian Reagan from Capital New York. She's managing editor there. They're an online publication. And we have Yvonne Leow. Leow. She was former director of video at Thunderdome, which was a project of Digital First Media, which unfortunately shut down recently. But she's been rehired by North Base Media as a senior associate, and she is also she's going to be a Knight Fellow this fall. So congratulations. And yeah, so basically today we are going to get an idea from our panelists of what are the changes in the industry and how we can adapt to them and what's new and exciting. So
and everyone can tweet about it with the hashtag.
Yes, social media stuff. It's a hashtag Revamped. Also hashtag WIC panel, WIC panel. Also at journalism_NYU.
NYU_journalism.
NYU_journalism.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
and you guys can give your Twitter handles.
yeah. So first, if you could give us a little bit of your background in journalism and what you do now in your title.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out on a rainy night, and thank you for putting together this panel, Elizabeth. I am pleased to be a part of it. My name's Alicia, and as was mentioned, I'm an editor at CNN.com, and I work in digital now. My sorry Twitter handle is @AliciaStew if you can't find me. But what's been fascinating about my career is it's taken like several permutations and like iterations and evolutions. But the consistent theme has been storytelling in a variety of mediums. I kind of feel like, whether it's video production, whether it's documentaries, or whether it's now digital, it gives me the opportunity to kind of speak different languages. And everything in my career has been organized around identity, culture, and spirit. So whether that was working on PBS's African American Lives or working for All Three Women's Networks in a kind of news capacity, to try to find like really interesting, uplifting content that's smart and can kind of progress the conversation on news, which brings me to CNN.com, where I am currently making a move from mostly television production experience, and we launched a blog with the In America unit, Soledad O'Brien's documentary unit. You may be familiar with Black in America, Latino in America, and a lot of in Americas. And we launched a blog. I took over that blog, and then that evolved into an identity beat, and that's what I currently do now.
I wanted to take her mic. So yeah, hi, I'm William. I was actually where you guys were 2 years ago, I think. Time is really flying by. I've been at ABC News now for a year and a half, and then I started with Fusion in July. So for those of you who don't know, Fusion is owned by ABC News and Univision News. So it's kind of like, I would say my dream job, because I get to do news in English and in Spanish, and it's actually what I've been doing in New York. I've been working with Univision News and ABC News to produce content for both channels. And then I get to kind of repackage the stuff that I do get to do for those channels and put it on Fusion, which right now doesn't have a lot of viewers, but for the most part, everything that's been directed to the site has gotten good responses, mostly because of the parent companies and stuff like that. I think that in terms of journalism and what I get to do and what I wanted to do, it's the best place for me to be, because you get to try so many ideas and there's no like they're still trying to find their identity. And I think in today's world of journalism anyway, it's like you don't really know what's going to work anymore and what's not going to work. Like nobody really sits there and watches or is watching TV live anymore. Everybody's either recording or everybody's on the go, everybody's on their phone, and everybody's still trying to figure out how to get people back involved in news and kind of like, so that is basically what we're trying to do now, is trying to start something new, and maybe people will start to watch it, maybe they won't. At this point, I don't think anybody really knows what to do anymore, so.
You guys are trying to
Oh, well, that's what they say. I don't know. I think everybody's trying to target millennials, but Fusion's probably one of the first organizations to come out and say that's what they're trying to do. Now, it's only been 6 months more or less, so I don't know if they're succeeding yet, but they're definitely trying for what it's worth. Oh, Mr. Gallego. Mr._Gallego. Yeah, okay.
Hey guys. So I was where you guys were 6 years ago or 5 years ago or something like that. Yeah, and so I'm originally from Massachusetts. I had a job. My first job was writing obituaries. It's a great first job, honestly. And then moved to New York because this is the place for media, and went here and started an internship at the New York Observer, a weekly paper, as a reporter. And then met two editors there who I fell in love with, and that's something that hopefully all of you are able to experience, is falling in love with your editor and really working with amazing people. And I've been with them for 7 years pretty much. It was 7 years ago that I graduated from school. So they left the Observer to start a startup called Capital, and it was just us three for 3.5 years, and it was a long struggle. And then we were acquired by Politico this past end of summer, and now we are a pretty aggressive new startup that reports on politics in New York. So right now I'm a managing editor, which means I do a billion things, and across like all facets of the job, from the newsroom job, from like ordering business cards and like making signs telling people how to recycle, to editing a story and waking up at 4:30 in the morning to produce newsletters. So my job is pretty different from just like reporting like I did when I first got out of school, but it's pretty great. That's it.
Thanks. Thank you guys for coming out. My name's Yvonne Leow. And I think that there's one theme so far up until recently. My career has really been involved in visual storytelling. So I went to UCLA. We didn't have a journalism department there, but we had the Daily Bruin, and at the time, the online video department was created because the local broadcast television station had been consolidated into the newspaper, which was actually really good timing because that was around 2008 or 2007. And that was like when YouTube and online video started picking up, I believe. I could be making up facts tonight, but it's not recorded, so I'm okay. Keep tweeting, guys. And after that, I actually did an internship at the Associated Press in New York for their entertainment online video department. And I think being in New York and just like living in the city really made me want to come back one day. And I thought like, hey, journalism, this is how I'm gonna live it up in the big city. And then I decided to graduate in 2009, which, if you guys aren't familiar, is a really terrible time to graduate and become a journalist. But it ended up working out. So I interned at the Seattle Times that summer after graduation, and actually applied for a job there and didn't get it after my internship. So I was unemployed for a month, which was really heartbreaking at the time. But then I went to the O&A conference, actually. And I look at Alicia because she's really involved in O&A. And I would also highly encourage you guys to be involved in journalism organizations and keep meeting people. And then connected with the folks that I had interned with at the AP in San Francisco at the O&A conference. And they told me about a job in Phoenix that they had opened. And that is how I landed in Phoenix, being their West Regional video producer for the AP. I did that for 2 years. And this is like a play-by-play. I'll sum it up really quickly. I actually left the AP to try and do a startup. It did not work out. It actually failed. But then went to another conference and met the person who was hiring for Project Thunderdome, which is actually kind of a startup at the time. It was about 2 years ago. I know. I get that a lot. The laughter of Thunderdome. But no, it's okay. It was a really good experience, but actually it just imploded recently. And if you guys Google it, you can read about it. And I was the director of video there, but what we were able to really work on was actually team up with the data team and the interactives team and create really cool multimedia projects. And we're talking, like, we were being very ambitious about trying to do stuff like Snowfall, the New York Times, and kind of strive for that kind of stuff. So there's really good exposure to that. But now I'm not in the production anymore. I'm actually spending this summer at a venture capital startup called North Base Media and learning more about the business side of journalism, which kind of goes full circle for me because when I got into it in 2009, the business was really struggling. And I think now is a really great time to be a journalist. Like, there's a lot of opportunity now. But there's still a lot of questions, especially about how to make journalism sustainable. So that's the kind of stuff I'm working on, and I hope that helps.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll begin with our first question. What is
Your Twitter handle and Gillian.
Oh, my Twitter handle is Gillian May, M-A-E. It's my middle name.
My Twitter handle is Yvonne Leow, my full name.
tweet? Okay, so what is the greatest industry change your news organization is experiencing, and what are you doing to adjust? And I'm going to begin with Gillian, if that's okay, because Capital New York is relatively new, and yet you've seen a lot of growth.
Yes. So, well, I mean, there's like the typical stuff that people always say at these panels, which is, well, the digital world just kind of has totally changed our business. But it also has provided a lot of opportunities. And I think that that's something that people miss in these panels sometimes, is like it all sounds doom and gloom. I think it's awesome, actually. The digital world, it's super exciting. It's super exciting to find new ways to tell stories and get paid to do them, which now people are willing to do, is pay you to come up with innovative, cool ways to tell stories in a different way rather than a block of text. But, you know, for us, it's still a block of text. Like, for us, because there's so many people online, because there's Twitter, because there are so many citizen journalists doing amazing work, it's really competitive. And you have to have something really good online in order to capture people's attention. So for us, that has been, making sure that we are breaking news. So you can have, like, for some sites, their like bread and butter is really great commentary, or having like amazing photos of beautiful bikini bodies or something like that, and that's great, and like a whole nother like business realm. But for us, it's like what are we breaking news? And our competition is the Times, the Wall Street Journal, like direct competition with those people. Like, what are we breaking about the Bill de Blasio administration that they're not? Because you need to get people to pay attention. Like, really, like, this is really important stuff that's going to affect their lives and their jobs. So I think that's been the biggest change, is just like really having to be really good at what you do. A lot of newspapers had the luxury of being the only people really watching what was going on, and now you need to be really aggressive and work a lot harder. So there's that.
Does anybody want to jump in?
Sure, I'll jump in. I think just to tag along with that is totally it. I mean, it's not just the kind of like constant, like you have to be on top of your game and at a larger level and be differentiated, especially when you're a startup, to kind of like make your space and make your voice known quickly. But also it's constant, particularly if you're online. And the kind of demographics and like have changed in terms of how people are getting their news, whether it's mobile, and so you have to kind of not just be the first and be the best, but you have to like deliver it in all ways possible. And I think that's a big change that people have had to get used to as well. And I think too, just like, the audiences are aware that they can get their news from all these different places. So kind of like putting your stake in the ground, owning it, and just being aware that, hello, this weekend, a Deadspin or a TMZ is right up there competing with all these major established media networks because they're able to get access to news. And because of that, I think that there's like a bleeding and blurring of lines in terms of like that kind of entertainment news or that kind of salacious news that would never have made like the front of the New York Times or, the top story on CNN is definitely now playing with that because everything is kind of bleeding into each other.
I'm also going to chime in, and I'm going to be a little biased here, but I think news has also become increasingly visual and really dominated by photography, videos, GIFs, like animation. And I think there's like a lot more potential online now to be experimenting with that type of visual storytelling. I would also add, I think, more of like a cultural shift, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about that. But I also feel like with so much competition now, there's actually more room for failure, which is equivalent to saying there's more room for experimentation. So before, when there was less competition, it was a bigger splash when you put something out there and it just didn't work. But you're seeing a lot of startups out there, like Capital, going for market share and going to try and like build audiences out there and seeing what works. And no one has it figured out, which is kind of the beauty of it. Like no one's figured out what the magic formula is. I don't even know if it really exists. But there's a culture change, and I think that's actually really exciting for people who are just coming into the journalism industry or in it right now.
Well, I have to go last, so I think I'm just going to repeat a lot of their points and then pretend I made it up myself. No, I'll say that what I've noticed mostly, actually, since the demographic that the news organization I work for is kind of supposed to be younger. And one thing I've seen a lot, like you've seen this year, about a couple of weeks ago, months ago maybe, Jimmy Fallon took over for Jay Leno finally on The Tonight Show. And there was this running gag on the blogosphere I saw anyway about how it wasn't like your dad's Tonight Show or even your grandfather's Tonight Show. It was like a whole new Tonight Show. Like it's just changing completely what the content that they were putting out. It was now veered towards a younger audience. Jimmy Fallon was seen as a host that kids or millennials could relate to. And so that's kind of like what I've been seeing a lot in the content that we've been pushing out. It's something that, I don't know, it's like entertainment news. I don't even know how to really explain it. Like they basically want something that would catch somebody's attention, and now everything is about retention, not so much how many page views, how many video views or anything like that. It's did you make it through the entire video? Did they read the entire story? Did they go through the slideshow? And so to kind of piggyback what they were saying is what you want to do is create something that people will not only be entertained at the top, but they'll see it through, because that's what matters, I guess, today anyway. I know that we have a news channel, but honestly, nobody really cares about it. What we care about is fusion.net, which is the website. Everything is geared towards that. From Twitter, Instagram, I mean, we have like an entire department now that does 15-second videos on Instagram. It's like, I think it's ridiculous, but nobody really has a formula right now of how to like retain their audience. So it's like, because there's so much news, like I said, there's so many more outlets now where you can get your news. So it's like, just because you go to this site to get your news doesn't mean you're going to stay there. You're just going to go through Google, and whatever comes up as your first hit, that's what you're going to rely on for the source. Or Twitter, whatever's been retweeted by whoever you follow. It's not really like there's a reliable source for news right now. I don't mean that CNN or ABC or anything like that is not reliable. I just mean that they're probably not the first place people go to. People usually go to social media, and whatever's there, that's what they follow.
Okay. So do you think that the definition of news is different today, and kind of goes back to what you've been saying about social media, and in particular, I'd like to begin with CNN because of their coverage on the Malaysia flight, for example, on Ukraine. At least I've noticed a shift of, kind of focusing on one subject. So how do you think the definition of news is changing, if it is.
Well, I think it depends on what your starting point is. So, like, since I've been in the news game, not that long, not as long as maybe some of the folks in here, but I definitely have seen a shift toward like things that were considered maybe softer news in the past, i.e. entertainment style news, is as legit as Ukraine. You know what I mean? And that for a lot of purists is very difficult to swallow. But I think it kind of is all within this shift writ large that we've been talking about in terms of how people get their news and how people experience news. But I don't think that, it necessarily has to be one or the other. But I think in terms of, in my time in the industry, that's what I've seen. Like, there was definitely, there's definitely a understanding that, you can read People and you can read New York Times and Wall Street Journal and like be well-rounded. Like, it doesn't have to be like you're somehow, soft because you're reading about Britney Spears. So I would say that in my time, that definitely was looked down upon more so when I was starting in journalism, and it's definitely just a reality of how things are played out now.
I'll also add that I feel like news has become a lot more conversational and collaborative, for sure. Like, conversational, like you can see like the types of blogs that are being put out or being led by a lot of these legacy news organizations, even for the New York Times and with Upshot. The Washington Post and just blogs in general have a very conversational tone, and before that, everything was AP style. Like, there was only one way to write a news story, and that was the way. And so the web has kind of democratized that, and it's also democratized the way content is being created. I think a lot of people, if you guys are in the right situation at the right time and publish something on YouTube, that is news, in my opinion. Because then when news organizations gather it or recruit you and call you and ask you what's going on, like, you're very much part of the news process and the news cycle, and that, in my perspective of how news has been evolving.
If I can just add one more thing. The other thing I think with that is just these kind of like broken barriers of like the news on high being this official source of everything, whereas you're just as likely to see like established news organizations like give a shout out to Twitter that's where that initial news came from, and that is really, really different. That would have never happened 10 years ago. Firstly, because Twitter didn't exist, but also because I think just in the terms of within established circles, there was certainly a specific way in which you verify and you get news and you go through processes. So that's been a huge shift.
Do you want to say something, Jill?
No, I mean, I just agree mostly, and I would say, I mean, I remember it being like a huge deal. One of our reporters at The Observer, which was a weekly newspaper that didn't even have a website until I joined the organization in 2007. We broke some news about Joe Biden, and I remember the New York Times said, that we broke the news on the front page of the newspaper, and it was a huge deal that the Times credited us. And now, like, TMZ.com is getting credited on the front page of the New York Times. You need to understand how different, like, people always say, like, oh, like, so boring to hear about, like, people talk about this change. It is actually a huge change. And it's one of the reasons why we don't really know the formula, right? And we're still, like, adapting to this because, I think infotainment is amazing. I think it's amazing that there's an entire group of people putting out 15-second videos on Instagram. I think that's awesome. You know what I mean? And we're an organization that's like, we're going to credit everybody. Like, we're not snobs. We're going to like give credit to whoever credit is due. If it was some person on Twitter or some person who took a picture on Instagram and we're putting it out for people to know, like, that's news. I do think that there needs to be, there is, we like, for us as an organization where I'm a little biased, we report on politics, which is like very like snorry to a lot of millennials maybe, but it is really, we consider it really important stuff to be reporting on. Like, we still think, like it is important for journalists to be watching politicians, to be on beats, not just like you know, like their world is like celebrity, and so and that's amazing, and they can report on all different kinds of celebrities and stuff. But if your beat is like, you know, the Bill de Blasio administration, then, you know, like, you are going to go in there and you're going to break some news. You're going to find out where the money's going. You're going to find out who's making deals behind doors. That stuff is still really important and good work, and deserves to be given credit to. So that's the only thing. I think the definition of news is expanding and changing, and I think it's awesome. I think there's still a need, you know, I just still want to champion and cheerlead that kind of reporting, because I think it's still really needed and important. So.
Sorry to keep leaving you for last, William. You can go next. You can go first next.
Again, I'm just going to repeat what she said, and it'll be my original thought. Actually, I'll start where she ended, which was basically about how important it is to have beats, and still, especially she's more about politics, and, you know, my generation is supposed to be a generation that doesn't really care about politics. And while I may be different, I will kind of agree with her, because a lot of friends probably didn't know, a lot of my friends didn't know who Elliot Spitzer or Anthony Weiner were until their scandals broke. And in that sense, probably in terms of like, has news changed and what is news? Probably 40 years ago, that didn't matter as much what they were doing. Although 40 years ago, they probably wouldn't have been able to send their nether regions out to the entire, you know, so maybe that would be different. But I mean, you just think about it in terms of that, you know, Kennedy was known to have affairs, I think, and stuff. You know, he was known as a womanizer as well, and he cheated on his wife, but that didn't matter back then. And now people care about what Obama is doing and what his bracket is for March Madness, and it's just, I don't know. I mean, I think the fact that you get news so fast is what makes it change. It's that the fact that we have so much time to fill in a day, and news can literally now fill every second in that day. So I think that's kind of what makes it change. And the fact that you do have Twitter, and you can know what's happening right now on the other side of the world just by typing in the number sign and China, and you will probably see what's going on the other side of the world from here, sitting down on this couch. So,
And to that, you know, increasing acceleration of just breaking news, is there still, you know, the perception that what happened yesterday is not news? I mean, because often that's what leads to things being underreported, because you can report on something that already happened in the past.
I mean, I think the audience determines that, you know, like how quickly something is old or not. If people are still reading about Sterling today, even though it happened on Friday or when the news came out, then we're going to keep serving up news. If people are still clicking on missing plane, you know, a month later, then we're going to serve up some more. So I mean, audience is definitely a part of this, and let's just not forget that's a critical component of it. And I think that it really is dependent as much on the audience as it is by more story.
Yeah, and I'll just say, you know, I absolutely, like, you know, I think the audience determines what's yesterday's news and what's today's news in some ways. I think that there is this big open space for yesterday's news, in that there is so much happening, right? There's like so much stuff going on all at once, and there's like Twitter, and there's all this stuff happening, and nobody actually knows like where it all came from, right? Because a lot of people who are like jumping on these Malaysian plane stories or something, or the breaking news beat, right? Which like there's an entire, you know, like sections of breaking news reporters that their whole job is just to be on top of what's breaking. But people who really understand, you know, these, like, you know, people who understand, like, you know, like explainer journalism, I think is something that's, might be yesterday's news, but is still really needed to like break down news, how it happened, the history of this stuff. And you actually really need reporters who have been on those beats or understand what's going on. And there's like Vox is like a new place that's like sort of trying to do this, and I'm interested to see how they get it. But, you know, like how this happened, why this happened, you know, people don't even understand New York City, you know, like what happened to affordable housing in New York City? Like what really happened? What were the laws? Who were the people? What were the tax stuff? What was like the deals made in meeting rooms? Like, you know, I mean, this is stuff that we walk by every day, that we deal with every day as people who rent in New York City, that we need to understand. So that's yesterday's news, but it's really important news, and something that people will click on. So Yeah, I mean, I think that also, like, you determine as, like, an organization, too, you know, what is news that you can create, you know, and sometimes that is a really good investigation of something that happened 20 years ago, you know, so just things like that.
So with all the developments, technology, we know that it's changing news, and but what about the way that we cover it? For example, I've read a lot about how some think that, you know, on the ground reporting has just kind of gone out the window because you just report off somebody else's story, or the whole people don't have a long enough attention span, so short journalism is preferred to long form. Do you want to take that one, William?
Oh, yes. So now everything I say, they're gonna just.
I'm gonna steal it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how this works. Well, I think on one hand, in terms of like producing shorter content, stuff that people will watch or see entirely through, I think that is important on one hand, just because that seems to like capture people's attention. I mean, you have Vine videos now. Like, I know people try to do Vine videos to like tease a story. I've seen that on Twitter a lot, or even on Instagram. You know, tune in tonight, and then they'll post a video that you can just like preview whatever's going to be on that night. So on one hand, I think that does serve a purpose, but I still think that news in general has to go in depth. I mean, I've worked on stories that I started working on the day I stepped in Fusion, and they still haven't aired, only because there's still so much reporting to do. And even though you probably like to think that people are going to watch the entire thing and they're going to be like, wow, thank you for informing us, you know, there's a part of you that kind of understands that a lot of them are probably only going to watch the first 2 minutes and say, okay, that's all I need. But I still feel a responsibility as a journalist to do the job right, get my facts straight, and basically do justice to the story and whoever it is I'm reporting on. So I think that is important. I've also spent one day on a story, like where I get an assignment, and by the end of the day, I turned in that story and it's now done. It's up on the web, it's being watched, it's being read. So, you know, on one hand, I probably didn't get to do as much reporting as I would have liked to do on that story, but that serves a purpose too. So I just think that news in general, as short as you want to make it for like mobile phones, and you want it so people can watch it and read it and take it on the go, but that can only do so much, I think. I think eventually you do need the longer form, you do need the long investigations, I don't know how long is an article, like 3,000, is that a lot of words?
That's
for
a
an
lot of
article?
words.
Okay, so you
1,500 is a lot of words.
you still need the 1,500 word articles, the 3,000 word, you still need those as much as the 400 word articles. Okay, as much as those account, you still need the longer ones. I think it's still important to get news and to like flesh it out and do real reporting.
I would also say that it really depends on the story that's kind of driving how it's presented on the internet. And the reason I say that also is because at Thunderdome, like, we thought a lot about that, and we created a lot of videos for Instagram that were just short 15-second explainers, but we didn't try and cram a lot of information in. Like, we would actually define one word, like Al-Qaeda, and then do it in 15 seconds. But then we also spent, you know, like an in-depth series about gun culture in America, and we actually sent journalists to various suburbs around America and actually did like documentary profiles. But in that process of shooting that profile, we learned that, you know, whatever our initial idea was, we wanted to create a game at first where you'd actually make it interactive in some way, but we didn't have the content to make that work. And that happened several times where we had an idea, we wanted to do it, but like, if we want to create a photo-driven interactive, if you didn't have very good photos, don't make it photo-driven, just because it's gonna look really bad, because the photos are not the strong suit of the story, or they're not gonna tell the story the best way. So I would say, in terms of just gathering news, the resources are more than ever, but just being much more thoughtful about how it can be presented, because there are so many various distribution platforms and so many different ways for it to be done now. I mean, even just within video, I don't know how many visual storytellers there are, but we hired a motion graphics designer purposefully because we had a small team and we couldn't afford to send people to respond to a lot of breaking news and compete with other news organizations on that level. So we hired a motion graphics designer, and she could create the news or visualize the news for people without actually having to go and shoot video. So that's out there now, and that wasn't something that I think newspapers were doing even 5 years ago.
Gillian? So this next question has to do with kind of what I grew up thinking the purpose of journalism was. The idea of holding your government accountable, right? Reporting the truth and providing this information to citizens. So what do you think is currently the relationship between journalism as a product of entertaining and as an instrument to hold your government accountable?
I mean, I think they work hand in hand because, as we were talking about earlier, just how the definition of news has kind of expanded and coalesced between those two things. First and foremost, I have to totally just underscore what Gillian was saying about local politics. That's huge, and that's everything. It's even more important than, the big 2008, 2012, et cetera, election, because that is impacting you locally. That affects your route to school, your kids to school, your route to work. It affects everything on how you interact daily. So I think that is really key. And I think in part of the evolution of journalism, unfortunately, a lot of resources are taken away from local news when you have budgetary restrictions. But, having said that, what I kind of call snackable news, when you're kind of on your mobile phone reading and catching up on what Miley Cyrus is doing, or, whatever else is going on, news of the day, that is a part of just kind of how we humans interact and talk. I mean, that's your small talk to get your source to open up about why they really did that to their wife. You know what I mean? So all of them kind of work hand in hand, and you just think about how we communicate as human beings. We don't always start with the hard breaking news investigation stuff first, and we just have kind of conversations around stuff that's benign or that we can safely talk about, which tends to be more entertainment. So both are kind of needed.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and say that the perfect example of this is the Sunday paper, the New York Times. And if you get it, I mean, I remember some jerk on Twitter, linked
there
to...
are so many.
I know, guys, don't be a jerk on Twitter. It's really annoying. But there was this one guy who was linked to this article in the Times Style section, which, first of all, I wrote 2 stories for the Times Style section. It's an awesome section, and with really good editors. So by the way, don't ever... I know it's easy to make fun of the Style section, but it's really cool. And anyway, he linked to some article about how in this style section about some fashion designer talking about how to be a mom and how she handles being a busy mom and the services that she uses, right? And was if only the Times could have paid this reporter to do investigative journalism about weapon mass weapons of destruction or whatever, instead of doing this stupid Times article. And I was you know what? That article and the ads that are around that article pay for that reporter to go to Iraq and get and their flights and their insurance and everything else. So actually love you, New York Times Style section. Do these ridiculous articles with fashion designers that are getting profile with fluffy pieces. That's great, and that's really me also understanding the journalism business and really being on the other side, which everyone sees as evil and stuff like that. It's not. These are the people, those advertising people. That infotainment news gets you the money to do the investigative, important stuff. So for me, it goes hand in hand, right, in the conversations and in the money. It really. You need both, and for us, our site, and so we have some magazines over there that you can look at. None of it's fun. It's all there's no style section, unfortunately. It's all policy and politics and stuff. But it's but there is fun stuff in there, kind of. There's we have an issue on sin, and there's articles about the pot industry in Ithaca, and what if we actually made pot legal and stuff, and what are beer breweries and that industry and like anything. So I'm just saying that I just think that it really goes hand in hand, and you still can be a company who is watching the politicians and writing about the latest Miley Cyrus thing. I think it's just like, it's something to understand as you're going out there, hopefully, to understand that that doesn't mean that they're like lower or like not as, important. It's all part of the ecosystem.
And that's how newspapers have always been.
Exactly.
Like there's always been like an entertainment section and a sports section. Like that supported like the local news and the crimes in courts coverage and things like that. I mean, classifieds also, but newspapers have always covered everything. So I would just agree with everyone that it isn't too much of a dissonance to have like some fluffy cat video next to like a very hard-hitting long read.
I mean, I think it just goes back to like, think about how you even consume news, right? Like we don't have these binary existences where we're like serious Alicia all the time, only investigative deep pieces, or Beyonce, like it's all together. Like we don't like separate and consume things ourselves. Why would we expect that from, the way in the places where we consume news?
William, do you think fusion?
I agree.
Audience? Well, I mean, I think Fusion is trying to cover some serious stories too. Do you get clicks on those?
I think our cat videos are the most popular. No, seriously. I think one of our most popular stories actually was an interview with Bill Clinton. I was actually at that shoot, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, this man got old really fast. Where is the young Bill Clinton that I remember from 1998, and he was no longer there. But I also remember that I was thinking at the time, like, do people care about Bill Clinton still, and who is he, and why are we doing this interview? And that was supposed to be a serious issue because Bill Clinton's wife, Hillary, is supposed to be running for president, or they say, and those are rumors that are going around in 2016. And so I think that in terms of like the news and what's serious and like infotainment, I don't know, what did she call it? And entertainment news, I don't know, whatever they called it. I just think that they do go hand in hand. I mean, I don't know how to basically separate the two when throughout your day you have different things that happen to you and you read the news and you consume news differently than most people would. I mean, on one hand, I live in New York City, so probably what happens in New York City is more important to me than what happens in Boca Raton. Or, it's like, that's in
Good example.
yeah, no, that's the first thing that came, It's like so I just think that news in general is always going to come with different parts. Sports is just as important. I mean, today we have the owner of the Los Angeles Clippers and, making racist remarks and being forced to sell his team. And then tomorrow we're probably going to have another politician exposing himself as a man who cheats on his wife. I don't know. I'm just saying that, like, news in general is always going to be consumed regardless of what the topic is. It doesn't, and I think that they do support each other, like they said. So you see, I just repeated what they said.
What do you think is gonna cause the next big wave in journalism? Any suspicions?
I will put on the record, journalists have never been good about predicting the future, and I'm not going to start now, but what we are good at is trying to add context and historical context to it, to, the things that we report on. And what we have seen continuously, whether that's, the advent of the radio and television, they never, eliminated the previous way of getting news. It just changed the game a bit. It just became another way to consume news. So just as you might, have read a story this morning, or you'll read this evening on your mobile, but you might also checked out the Today Show or GMA and maybe not picked up a paper, but at least gone to the website to read a story about what was going on. All of those are different mediums, and I think that's one of the reasons why I've made a commitment to try to continue to evolve and learn new spaces, because it's not so much the method as much as just, or the medium as much as just the idea of storytelling and being able to be fluent in those, or at least conversant in those different languages.
Yvonne, you were talking about video. You think video?
Well, I'm kind of curious. I would agree. I'm not going to try and predict what the future of journalism is. I think that's a crapshoot. But I will say what people are talking about. So I'm curious, does anyone wear a Fitbit?
sometimes.
Occasion. Okay. And has anyone ever tried Google Glass? Okay. I know. One day. Exactly. So I went to a Tribeca hackathon actually relatively recently because the film festival was in town. And it was amazing to see a film festival bringing developers, designers, and storytellers and starting to hack like actual wearable objects and trying to see like adding augmented reality to it, which is like where you look through your app and it will show some things on the screen that isn't really there in person, just Wikipedia augmented reality. But yes, like adding those type of dimensions to storytelling is actually really exciting. It's more physical, and I would actually really love to see more of like things on the internet and the physical realm kind of meet each other halfway, because I personally just hate sitting in front of a computer typing all the time. And I think that's why mobile phones are increasingly popular, is that you can experience the world better with the internet, with digital media, when the technology is really accessible. So some things to think about, and I think it's just very interesting to watch. It's like the Internet of Things is definitely emerging.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I don't know if you guys remember or were assigned to any of this, but I was in like 2008 and 2009 when the entire media world was falling apart and everyone was getting laid off. They were like, what is going to save journalism? And I remember we wrote a story at the New York Observer about mobile and like how mobile is going to be what everyone's just going to be on their phones. And like my thought was like, it'll be like you're walking down the street and you'll walk by this building and you'll get like something will go into your phone, like this is the history of the building, this is how many like inspections they've gotten, this is someone there. Yeah, or someone famous, this is the real estate owner who owns it. You're in this neighborhood has, say you get out of the bar and you're like, where am I? Then you can go and be like, oh, there's been like 4 knife fights in here in the last month. Maybe I should get a cab home instead of taking the subway. Things like that, where you could just get like direct like news to your phone. That's how like I see local journalism sort of shifting, is a little more real time and a little more augmented reality. Like you're walking around and just like getting this information to your phone. And for some people, and that's already happening with some apps, but I see more news organizations probably, hopefully, experimenting with that stuff. That stuff excites me. But I don't really know what the next like wave of something that's going to happen. I think mobile is going to forever be interesting, and I think Twitter is going to like not be as popular. I don't know. I feel like people think social media is going to be around forever. It will. But I don't necessarily see everyone on Facebook in 10 years or Twitter.
Hope not.
I really hope not. I hope it's totally different. I hope we're out and about a little more often. So that's the only
Which
thing.
explains my janky Twitter feed, FYI.
Yes, I'm just gonna add.
Mine's really boring.
William, 15-second Vine videos.
So I guess I'll just add that I don't know what's going to happen with journalism either, but I think that actually the being able to use your phones to watch short content and stuff like that, I think more stuff like that should be more mass produced, in terms of like having something where that's just what it is. Like right now you have, for example, World News, and you get like the top stories of the day, and Diane Sawyer just reads them off. And I say Diane Sawyer because when I'm at work, ABC forces you to watch these things. So, but that's what's at the top of my mind. Anyways, so I just think that it would be cool to like have something like an app where you can just kind of go through something like World News in 2 minutes and just like watch it like that, like just thrown at you really fast. Or like you go on Twitter and you can just, what's trending on Twitter because you can just go and search what are the top hits recently, and you can go through your news like that. So to see that, but a visual form of that instead of having to always read it, I don't know, I just always think of something like that. At work, I'm still trying to figure out a way to kind of like produce an entire story on my phone only, a video story, like just shoot it and edit it on my phone. I haven't figured out how to do it, but I'm still trying to do that. So I don't know if
You can do it.
I mean, I know I can. It's just my problem has always been audio. I'm a big like, if audio doesn't work for me, then I refuse to show it to anybody. So it's like just trying to put all those things together. But I don't know. So it's like I mean, my phone is pretty powerful, I think, anyway. I'm sure all iPhones are. They can do amazing things that my little flip phone from freshman year in high school couldn't do, so.
Though
you
I
know.
do miss Snake. Does anyone miss Snake? The game.
I miss,
Never mind.
Oh, I miss Snake.
Thank you.
yeah, I miss Snake. That's basically how I'm gonna end everything. I really do. I mean, I've had.
I agree.
So yeah, it's just.
So one last question before we open it up to the audience. What is the one tip that you would give aspiring journalists like ourselves?
If I had to like fuse it all together in one tip, I would say 2 in 1. I would say just be gracious and be open to learning. I guess gratitude and graciousness. Because you don't get any thank you notes in journalism. It's very rare. And your work is hard. I mean, it just is. It's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, between trying to have the responsibility of doing things correctly and accurately with the intention that the person meant when they said it to you, and then also doing it on deadline, it's a lot to balance. And I think the more I found, especially because I have kind of reinvented myself a few times, that being open to learning from people who are smarter than you and gracious while you're doing it really at least just gets you in the door. So when you make the inevitable mistakes that come from trying something new, they'll at least be willing to put a hand out to get you off the floor. So just having that humility and ability to be grateful is huge.
So I think the best advice I ever got was don't pigeonhole yourself. I started off thinking I was going to be this sports reporter, and honest to God, I've only been doing journalism for about 3 years now. I haven't done one sports story. So there you go. It's like just learn everything. I did a little bit of politics, probably not as much as she does, but I dabble. Now I focus a little bit now more on.
So you vote?
No, I don't even do that. I know who's running, maybe sometimes. I've done some stories on immigration policy. There's so many topics that you can cover, and it's like to just tell yourself that you're going to be a political reporter, or you're going to, just focus on fashion. You're just going to do entertainment. I don't think that's probably the best way to get into the industry, and that's not the best way to approach anything in life, actually. But so I just think, just be open-minded about everything. I mean, there's so much news to cover, and you just don't know where your next assignment is going to take you, and that's personally, for me, what really got me interested in wanting to be a journalist. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off that because I just think it's like even amazing just looking at the panelists who are on here who have completely different titles, completely different jobs, different paths, different ways of telling stories. Honestly, like even when I was in school, and no offense to NYU, but I mean, sometimes you'd go to these panels, and first of all, it'd be all white men who worked at newspapers. And that's like the only journalists who had like a voice to say what was important about journalism or what was like interesting about journalism, honestly. And that's not that long ago. I mean, I feel like I'm really old. You guys are all like young or something up here, but I mean that was in 2007, you know what I mean? Like when I was in school. So I think it's like definitely open yourself up to all, even the business side, which is totally fascinating to me anyway. I want to know how we're going to keep being able to do amazing journalism. So don't bristle at the business side. Hopefully be interested in it. And my other piece of advice would be to find a good editor. I think, especially in school, you can bristle a little bit about like getting edited and feel like every word is so precious. But it's really an awesome experience finding an editor who cares about you and cares about your work and wants to make it better, wants to get it out to a lot of people. And even if it's not like an editor, like someone who's actually like, because all of our jobs are different, just like a mentor, someone who can really help you along. And that's part of it, being open to like different kinds of people helping you out, I think is huge. So, and it'll make you a better writer, better videographer, better tweeter, whatever.
Definitely. Everyone's advice is extremely, extremely accurate and sound. I would just say if I were to think back to when I was in college and just trying to get a job, what advice I would have really wanted to hear, I think it would be just to not be afraid of rejection. Be totally unafraid of rejection. And what that means also is not be afraid to knock on people's doors, reach out to people and ask them for help, or ask them for an informational interview, or ask them if there are any job opportunities, or just email people that you just admire. Just to cold call people, cold interview. There's a fine line between being really, really annoying and just being aggressive and hireable, but make sure you don't cross that line. But I think for the most part, especially as women too, I don't know about you ladies, but I was at least really cautious about whether or not I was intruding or wasting people's time. And I think it's just to be assertive and say hey, this is what I want. I really think you can help me get there, and this is how I can help you in return. And just going for that. Men too, equal opportunity. But yeah, just really seize that
Cosign.
confidence.
Yeah. Can I recommend a book? It's called Ask For It, and it came out in the early 2000s, I think. But it's an amazing, amazing book for women. There's scientific proof that women don't ask for it. They don't ask for jobs. They don't ask for promotions. They don't ask for raises. And this is why women, partially, because there's a lot of men up there who do this, but it's really, it was a super eye-opening book for me that smashed my brain open and got me to where I am. So it's called Ask For It. It's on Kindle too. So.
And Carla Harris has a really good book. I mean, if you guys want to list of books, I'm the queen of reading everything, which is why I'm in the right profession. But there's a lot of good stuff out there. But I would absolutely co-sign on what these ladies both said, because when you're at the beginning of your career, particularly with women, it's very consistent and scientifically proven, not stereotyping. We feel somehow that we're shouldn't ask or we're bothering people. And I think you should be conscious, and I think it's good to be conscientious about how you are utilizing someone's time. I think that's a good quality, but also be just, again, gracious in how you're utilizing the time and in how you can also help them. Not just what they can do for you, but how, and sometimes that just might be a link to something you mentioned they said in a panel or a place, or they're interested in such and such. Have you seen this article? Have you seen this? This might be of interest, So not just the begging, what can you do for me, but also what I can do for you. And don't underestimate what you might be able to do for someone, even if they're more experienced.
Questions from the audience?
I think this is on. Okay. Hi. Thanks for coming. And sorry for the peanut gallery laughing over. There were some people who walked in making funny faces. Nothing to do with you. Yeah. So I have a question. I'm a senior graduating, and I've been working in print journalism since I was 15, and I'm 22. And I recently had the opportunity to work in maybe TV or, as a producer or something like that for a publication in the city. And I guess this is more directed to you, Alicia, maybe because you work at CNN. Is it a good idea to sort of make a really abrupt career change within journalism? No.
No. I'm saying that's totally my whole career, so I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's not so much abrupt, it's an evolution.
Right. And is it, with that said, maybe for other people who are thinking of the same thing, is it possible, if you maybe don't have a contact or you're just applying to jobs blindly, is it possible to just kind of go in and apply for these entry-level jobs or internships without a ton of experience under your belt?
I think it's absolutely fine to do that. I think a smarter strategy might be to think about what are the transferable skills that you're taking from one job to the next. So if you're a good writer and your experience is in print, then think about the 3 to 5 things that are going to make you a good reporter in television, and also think about what you do need to learn as well. I mean, I feel, you should always be as transparent as possible. That doesn't mean you should undersell yourself, but just kind of, if you have a conversation with someone. And then there was this article I read, it was called when I was freelancing a lot, the 7-day job search. And one thing that really has stuck with me over the years after reading this is most people just expect to send out, go to Idealist or go to, some television website and apply for jobs, and blindly the magic job will come, land in their lap. Whereas what they suggested is you start with what I've termed what you know and grow. Like, start with your circle and have your pitch ready and say, hey, I've been working for 7 years in print journalism. I'm looking to make a transition to television. I'm able to write really well. I can do it on deadline, and I'm always pitching really unique stories. Is there anybody you would suggest I talk to try to make that transition? And then you're just having a very non-pressurized environment where you're meeting people, you're having conversations, you're top of mind for them if something comes open or if something could come open in the future. And it's not like this intense, I have to make money situation, So it's fine to kind of blindly put it out there. That's one approach. I feel like that should only be one approach. But what I found to be more effective is to start with your contacts in your circle. And I always say minimum 3 people. Who are 3 people? Would you mind recommending 3 people that I can reach out to? Do you mind if I mention your name? Make sure you send a thank you card. Make sure if you say promise a 15-minute conversation, when 15 minutes comes up, say, you know what, we're hitting the 15 minutes. I promise only 15 minutes of your time. Do you have some more? I think has been a more effective way I found with people who are making transitions, particularly with me, to do that. One quick story on that. I was freelancing, doing a lot of work, like news-oriented, but within women's networks. So I literally worked for all 3 women's networks, Lifetime, Oxygen, Women's Entertainment at the time. And I really was challenged because I can be a serious person at times, and I really wanted to do something. I didn't even have the term in my head for it. I just wanted to do something more history-oriented, which is, I had studied that as well in school, and like cultural-oriented, but I didn't really know quite what to call it. But because what I was doing was fine, and it would have been a dream job for a lot of people, but I just wasn't as maybe challenged intellectually as I wanted to be. And I was just calling contacts, just because I had some time. And it turned out, and innocently just reaching out, not even like networking or looking for a job. And because I was just in touch with someone, they thought of me for this like perfect job for me, which was for a documentary, which gave me my first foot in the door in documentaries, which I had never done before, and which is notoriously closed for a lot of different reasons. But it was just kind of like keeping in touch with someone I had worked with before and who I actually had been giving career advice to like in the past. So that idea of like graciousness and gratitude, I don't say that lightly. I know it sounds like a whole bunch of fluffy stuff, but people remember that, and a lot of people are really rude, unfortunately, in our business because they're on deadline. So when you show kindness or graciousness, it's remembered.
And just on the flip side of that, I think this has such a terrible connotation, but networking has a really terrible connotation for some reason, but essentially that's what you're talking about. And I think the graciousness and the gratitude like makes you stand out and really makes you like a decent human being. Right. But from the employer's perspective, like being a manager, I think you can also imagine that people want to work with people they like.
Totally.
Like at the end of the day. Like you're looking at 2 resumes, they have the same skill sets. You meet them in person. If one's like, didn't really click, you're gonna go with someone that you like click with. I think that's just, I don't know if it's like a secret or not, but it's just human nature, I think. So you kind of have to think about that, and that's why meeting people and talking to people, building out your network, and they don't need to be treated like sterile connections. Like these are real relationships with people. They become your peers in the industry. They become your friends even and mentors. But just don't take that for granted. And make sure you realize like the cold calls are the first step to doing that, but then nurturing those relationships as they evolve, as you guys grow in your careers together, it really comes in handy. And speaking from experience was, I got laid off like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Like everything just like fell apart. My last day was on April 17th. The moment that happened, like everyone I knew either kept in touch with through Facebook or Twitter was like reaching out, sending me job opportunities, just like things. And a lot of job opportunities, like I don't know what the percentage is, but more than half of them are not posted. Yeah. Right?
75% of jobs are filled by the known candidates.
Right, because
So you gotta
Right, because even as a recruiter, when you're as a manager, and you're looking to fill your jobs, you're looking at people within your network because you know them and they're endorsed either by someone you know or someone they know, and things like that. So, I mean, that's how any industry works. It's not just journalism. I thoroughly believe that, but I think it's really key to our industry because it is a really small industry sometimes. You're going to work with some of the same people, and being gracious and having humility will take you far and help you stand out instead of burning bridges, but just making sure that you are going out there to conferences, getting mentored, like preserving those relationships with your editors and people you meet, and also paying it forward all the time would really help your career in the long run.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I'm studying journalism and politics, so I do not think it's lame. I love Mike Allen's playbook. I was just wondering, with the growing amount of news sources, what are your thoughts on sensationalism in this incredibly competitive market? I'm just curious.
What specifically about sensationalism?
Well, if it's unavoidable, or if it's good, if it's bad, that kind of thing. Like,
how do you define it?
Well, I'm hoping to hear that from you guys. Like, what would you consider sensationalism, whether or not it even exists anymore? I mean, like,
Yeah. Okay, I'll just take it for a sec, but here's the thing. Like, we can decide, I mean, you know, because there's so many different outlets out there, right? And there's like a Huffington Post, like, covers the same thing that the Daily Beast does, or Daily Beast doesn't exist anymore. So that, you know, the Huffington Post will cover the same thing that, say, CNN or NBC or Yahoo and all these different places will cover the same thing. Kim Kardashian is pregnant. Eight different articles across every major news outlet will have maybe something on it, right? So what are we as like a news outlet gonna do? Not cover it. Because like 8 other people are, people can go there to get their news from those other outlets, you know what I mean? As far as like, you know, if it's something like, you know, Bill de Blasio, you know, his driver went through stop signs after talking about Vision Zero, which is like no more people getting hit by cars and you know, things like that. And his driver drives away from that press conference going through several stop signs. Do we have to cover that? Yeah, but we have to have something new. We have to have a different angle. We have to have something better. We have to have our reporter who's been embedded at City Hall for the past couple of weeks getting on top of that and finding something different to say. So as far as sensationalism, like, you know what? I think it's so exciting being in a newsroom when a big story breaks. Oh my gosh, I hope you guys all get to experience like the newsroom, like, freelancing is amazing, but like being in a newsroom when a story breaks, even when you're not even part of it, like, you know, like I remember being in the newsroom when like, like this is an awful story, but like when the killer whale like bit like someone out in Florida, nothing to do with New York City, nothing to do, but it was so exciting being in the newsroom and watching people like get into action and just go after these stories. It's super exciting. I don't think there's anything wrong with sensationalism. As long as, you know, hopefully people are still paying attention to stuff that matters to them, as far as like, you know, stuff that matters to their communities and their everyday lives. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think just as a news outlet, you have to have something, a special sauce.
And I think as a news person, you have to kind of determine your own kind of stomach and gut check for what you're going to participate in or not. I can think of when I was doing local television news way back when, and I had to go. I was anchoring and reporting out of Columbia, Missouri, but I had to go to Kansas City for this like murder case, and the skill of mine, which I didn't even know that was a skill at the time, was I could get people to talk to me like when they wouldn't necessarily say stuff to other people, and so I was able to get this family to open up about this daughter got missing, but like the details got really grimy and murky and just really kind of like gross. Not necessarily from the grisly murder part as much as just like what was going on with the family and all this stuff. And I mean, it was something I was not comfortable like really pushing to like make the 10, like it was really close to that deadline. And so I remember having to make like a decision like personally in terms of how I wanted to ethically deal with this family. And it was based on how I would want to be treated, quite frankly. Like, and I think that you have to, there are times to be aggressive, and I'm all for like pushing hard and getting it, like holding people who are in power accountable, who have like, you know, been on the record and just done stuff that's janky. I think that that's completely appropriate. But there's also, I think, you have to have in your mind, like, okay, these are people who have never been exposed to this crazy news process, which is really crazy to the average person. It's not crazy to us because we do it every day. And how much you're willing to, you know, do that. And that can hurt you or it can help you. I can think of a time when a colleague of mine, just because of her disposition, and how she interacted with the family, all of these people, like literally every news station in America was trying to get to this family. And they chose us because of this person who was relatively, quote unquote, low on the totem pole of power, but just how they interacted with them. So you have to make that personal decision for yourself. And I mean, I always try to ask myself like 3 questions, you know, like just kind of have a gut check or a breath of fresh air. To determine that. Because, yeah, you know, your news station can have a level of sensationalism. You don't always have to abide by it, though.
Okay, guys, we kind of have to wrap up. Yeah. Last question.
Hi, I'm Carly. I graduated a couple of years ago. I'm still hanging around here. It's awesome. I just wanted to, there was a lot of stuff said tonight about web presence and digital media and going to phones and all that stuff. And as we're talking right now, there's a huge debate about net neutrality in the FCC, and that's going to vastly affect the internet and access to information. And I'm wondering, what do you guys think of that? Are you covering it? Are you pushing the story? Do you think people are aware of it? Is it sort of getting like shoved under the rug in some way? I just would love to know your thoughts on that.
I mean, it's definitely discussed around, like, you know, those of us who work in digital journalism in particular. I mean, there's an awareness of that. I think to the larger scope of the American public, if you said that, I don't think they would know what that is.
I mean, take a pulse. Do you guys?
Who knows what net neutrality is here? Yeah.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
But this is a journalism school, so I mean.
Right.
And some people in the audience did not raise their hand, so it's just like.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're not covering it, you know what I mean? But we're a local politics and media site. But I mean, I think it is something that's going to affect us. And I think that, you know, I think it's something like that the Times is going to cover and the Wall Street Journal is going to cover because they have the resources to do that. But it's not something that we would necessarily.
I mean, like you.
It doesn't lend itself well to the journalism that we're
Yeah.
not visual. It's not.
Right.
Maybe that's a really
Yeah.
cool data viz explainer
Right.
that somebody can do. On
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see it at like Wired. You're going to see it in our tech section. You're going to see it in, you know, the Atlantic's tech section. But in terms of like, and you know, this greater good, unfortunately, sometimes it takes a crisis for like the greater American public to get galvanized and for people to start writing on it. It doesn't mean that people aren't. I mean, there definitely are. You can Google it, but but in terms of like, if it's like, if I were to name a reporter right now, like I'm just thinking from ONA, from the Online News Association, like I can think of different people, Clay Shirky, and you know, different folks who are pretty much like proponents who are out there speaking about it. I could point you to that.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I guess I was unclear. I was just wondering how that was going to affect what you guys do. How that decision, whatever it is, whatever happens to net neutrality, like how that's going to change the way your stories get out there, who sees your stories, or the kind of impact that digital media would then be able to have.
I mean, I don't think we know until the decision is made.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Panelists, audience.
Thank you, Elizabeth.